strawman argument is an informal fallacy in which a person misrepresents an argument in order to make it easier to attack. This is done by providing a counter-argument against the misrepresentation of the argument in order to give the appearance of having countered the argument. The strawman fallacy gets its name from a metaphorical usage. Imagine if before a boxing match, one of the boxers made a representation of their opponent out of straw, then punched it to show how easily they can knock their opponent out. This is exactly what's being done to an argument when it's strawmanned. Whenever somebody commits a strawman argument against you, the easiest way to counter it is to just point out the fallacy as it gets committed and remind your interlocutor that you're under no obligation to defend words that they put in your mouth. One classic example of the strawman argument is the Republican stance against the legalization of marijuana. When liberals argue for legalization, Republicans often respond by telling them that unrestricted access to weed would ultimately cause a lot of harm to public health and safety. But liberals aren't arguing for completely unrestricted access to marijuana, just for it to be accessible to the same people that alcohol is accessible to, with the exception of particular minors who use it as a medicine for terminal illnesses. Shortly after I began working on the script for this video, I began reading this book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. It was sent to me by the moderator of a Christian channel that I had a debate on, and if you want to see that debate, I'll leave a link to it below in the description. I was initially going to read and review this whole book for my upcoming counter-apologetics series, but 2 chapters in, I found that this book committed so many strawman arguments that I decided to make it out to be the poster child for the fallacy. The first strawman occurs on the second page, where the author writes that we demand truth when it comes to politicians, teachers, and advertisers, but when it comes to morality and religion, many of us aren't interested in truth at all. In fact, he goes on to write, many downright reject the idea that any religion can be true. The author goes on to write that there's a contradiction here, that we demand truth when it comes to everything but morality and religion. I imagine that every skeptic reading this must become immediately frustrated by the assertion that those of us who aren't religious don't demand truth when it comes to religion. Many, if not all of us, actually reject Christianity for this very reason. Of course we demand truth, and to say otherwise is deliberately misrepresenting the argument for the rejection of Christianity, which is nothing other than dishonest. Later in the book, the author claims that our rejection of Christianity is often on volitional rather than intellectual grounds. They just don't want to be held accountable to any moral standard or religious doctrine, he writes. The next argument seems to be one against moral anti-realism, and the attack conveys that the author doesn't really understand what people mean when they say that moral statements themselves are not facts. First, I want to make clear that the author doesn't actually ever say the words moral anti-realism. It's just that it's clear that moral anti-realism is the idea that he's attacking when he's attacking atheism. And if you want to see why I say that, you can read it on page 40. The first point I want to make, and the first reason that this argument is a straw man, is that atheists are not compelled to moral anti-realism. Atheism is simply the absence of a belief in a God, and it makes no claims in regards to morality. On to my next point. The author writes that college professors are teaching their students that there is no truth, and that there are no absolutes. So what we see here is a criticism of the idea that truth is relative rather than objective. This continues this book's trend of repetitive strawmanning by portraying moral anti-realists as being people who think that truth is not objective, rather than people who simply don't believe that morality is objective. Then attacking the idea that truth isn't objective, which isn't what moral anti-realists think. Let's move on to the next argument. A sound deductive argument that commits no fallacy whatsoever and actually proves that it does in fact take faith to be an atheist. Just kidding. It's another straw man. The author writes that we make the truth claim that truth claims cannot be made. He says that we say that truth cannot be known, but then we claim that our view is true. In the pages where he makes this argument, he brings up absolute certainty and, naturally, makes the appeal to perfection. To be clear, absolute certainty is not the only definition of knowledge, so when I say that I can't be absolutely certain about anything, I'm not saying that I don't know anything. So what he's doing is he's attacking us for saying that we don't know anything when, again, that isn't what we're saying. In a talk given by one of the authors named Frank Turek, a talk given the same title as the book and making the same arguments, he goes on to talk about a question that he asks atheists in debates. The question is this: if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? He says that atheists will be asked this question, and in front of millions of people, they'll stand behind a microphone and say, no. Then, and this is where that straw man gets built, he says,
if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? I've had atheists stand in front of the microphone in front of hundreds of people, including last night at Purdue, and I ask that question, and they say, no. No? Wait. I thought you claimed to be reasonable. How's that reasonable? You wouldn't believe something if it were true?
This isn't only a strawman fallacy, this is also the equivocation fallacy. An equivocation fallacy is when a word with two meanings is used in two different senses in an argument. When he asks, is Christianity true? What he means is, if the claims of Christianity were true, such as the God of Christianity existing and the resurrection taking place. But when he talks about would you be a Christian, what he really means is, would you accept Jesus and follow his teachings, which are two completely different things. So when you say no to would you be a Christian, what you're saying is, no, I wouldn't follow Christ and I wouldn't follow the teachings. It's not saying that you wouldn't believe that it existed, and that's what he's trying to do. And he knows that that's what he's doing, and he's being completely dishonest.
Well, it's not reasonable. The problem isn't here. The problem's here. They don't want it to be true. They don't want there to be a God. Why? Because they want to be God.
A genuine question for those who use this argument. If I'm jealous of someone's authority, and I criticize how they use that authority, does that usually mean that I'm going to think that they don't exist? If so, why don't I just stop believing in Donald Trump? Consider what it's like to be raised religious, begin to doubt your religion, honestly and sincerely seek evidence that your belief is true, yet never find any, and be forced to lose your primary source of comfort because you just can't convince yourself that it's true, only to be told that you just choose not to believe in God because you don't want there to be one. This blatantly dishonest assertion that we don't believe in a God because we just don't want there to be one may be one of the most easily disprovable claims made by Christian apologists. Consider this. Do you think atheists want there to be cancer? How about malaria or COVID-19? Three things which I should mention are living organisms which, according to Christians, are made by God. But no. Of course, atheists don't want there to be cancer or coronaviruses, but does that ever stop us from believing that they exist? Of course not, because denying that something exists, which is causing harm to people, isn't going to be very helpful in combating that thing that's causing harm to people. If all you wish to do is be seen by those who already agree with you as some iconic debater who just crushes the opposing side's views, then strawmanning might serve as an effective way to achieve that goal. But remember, if you're hoping to change minds, then the only way that you're going to convince somebody that an idea that they hold is wrong is by honestly representing that idea as accurately as possible and then explaining to them what is wrong with the idea that they actually hold.